We're up to chapter 5, Mishnah number 22. Kol mi sheyesh biyado shlosha dvarim halalu. Any person who has these three traits, hu mitalmidav shel Avraham Avinu. He is a disciple, a student of Abraham, our forefather. Ushlosha dvarim acherim, and anyone who has three different traits, hu mitalmidav shel Bilaam Rasha. That person is a disciple of Bilaam, the Rasha, the wicked one. Ayin tova, a good eye. Viruach nemucha, and a spirit that is humble. V'nefesh shifala, and a soul that is low, that is weak. Talmidav shel Avraham Avinu. That is the markers. Those are the markers of a disciple of Abraham. Whereas ayin ra'ah, someone who has a bad eye. Ruach gavoa, an arrogant spirit. V'nefesh rochava, and a greedy soul, a rapacious soul. That those people who have those qualities are students, Talmidav shel Bilaam Rasha, students of Bilaam the wicked. Ma bein Talmidav shel Avraham Avinu Talmidav shel Bilaam Rasha. What are the differences between the students of Abraham and the students of Bilaam? Talmidav shel Avraham Avinu, the disciples of Abraham, our forefather, ochlim b'olam hazeh v'nochalim l'olam haba. They eat in this world, they benefit from their deeds in this world, v'nochalim, and they inherit olam haba, the world to come. Shenemar, as it says, quotes a verse in Scripture, in Proverbs, lehanchil ohavai yesh, to bequeath to those who love me, yesh, a possession, v'otzroseim amale, and I will fill their storehouses in this world. Aval talmidav shel Bilaam Rasha, but the disciples of Bilaam the wicked one, yorshim gehenim, they inherit gehenim, v'yordin barshachas, and they descend into the well of destruction. Shenemar va'ata leikim toridem leber shachas anshe domim umirma lo yechtzu yimeim v'ani eftach bach, which translates as, and you, O God, will lower them into the well of destruction, men of bloodshed and deceit. They will not live out half their days, but as for me, I will trust in you. Okay, so we have a Mishnah here comparing and contrasting Bilaam and Abraham, and Bilaam and his students versus Abraham's students. So just some background. Who is Bilaam? Bilaam is an interesting figure who appears in the book of Numbers. There's a whole parsha dedicated to him and all the events that happened to him. That's Parshas Balak. With the exception of a few verses at the end of the parsha, the whole parsha is told from the vantage point of Bilaam and the enemies of the Jews. Bilaam was a sorcerer who was hired to try and curse the juggernaut that was the Jewish people. The Talmud tells us that there are 4 people who lose their portion of the world to come, and one of those people is Bilaam. And in our Mishnah, we're told the 3 hallmarks of the students of Abraham, and that is presented in contrast to the 3 characteristics of the students of Bilaam. And the commentaries expand this concept by saying that all positive traits were found in Abraham and in Abraham's students, and all negative traits are coalesced in Bilaam. Almost as if saying that the three traits of our Mishnah, having a good eye and a humble spirit and not to be so desirous of things and materialism, those things really encompass all good character, whereas all the negative character is found in Bilaam and his students. It seems from the Torah in this Mishnah that there's an emphasis to study the character of Bilaam, because never in history do we have a character so corrupt and so evil and someone who has all the negative traits that if you study Bilaam, you know exactly what not to do. Almost the exact opposite of Abraham. Everything Abraham did, you can emulate, even though I will warn you, if you hear a voice telling you to go sacrifice your son, don't listen to that voice, because you're not quite Abraham. But in general, Abraham's character is one that is so laudatory and noble, everything that he did, we're going to emulate. And Bilaam, although he portrayed himself as being very righteous and noble, was completely corrupt and wicked. Now, it's interesting that our Mishnah contrasts these 2 people, Bilaam and Abraham. Of course, they did not overlap in their story. Bilaam is the prophet of the Gentiles, and he tried to curse the Jewish people when they were being led by Moshe. Yet the Mishnah does not contrast Bilaam to Moshe, rather Bilaam to the founder of the nation, to Abraham. And if you look at the two stories of Bilaam versus Abraham in the Torah, you find that their stories are very similar, of course, and opposite. So for example, Abraham is told, those who bless you I will bless, and those who curse you I will curse. That's the promise of God to Abraham in chapter 12 of Genesis. When Bilaam is being hired to curse the Jewish people by Balak, king of Moab, he says a very similar thing. Those who you curse are cursed, and those who you bless are blessed. Another similarity that we see between these two people. They both went on a 3-day journey, accompanied by 2 lads. They both woke up really early to do it, and they both saddled their own donkey. Abraham travels for 3 days on a donkey to go sacrifice Isaac in the Binding of Isaac episode. Bilaam travels also on a donkey to go curse the Jewish people. And both of these journeys began with the leader of the mission, the protagonist of the story, the villain, if you will, of the story in the case of Bilaam, waking up early. They're so excited to do it. Abraham is excited to listen to God. Bilaam is excited to try to curse the nation of God. And they saddle their own donkey. In fact, Rashi tells us that this shows how people's emotions conquer their intellect. Abraham, he was the richest person in the world. He had servants, endless amount of servants. Yet, who saddled his donkey? He did it himself. Why did he do it himself? Because he had so much love for God that that emotion of love conquered the normal course of things. Normally, he should have someone, one of his underlings, do the work for him. But love conquers the order. Similarly, Bilaam was very rich. He too had plenty of people who would do his bidding. Nevertheless, he woke up early and saddled his own donkey because hatred also corrupts the order. It makes people do crazy things. So they both take these very long and consequential trips, traveling with lads, and are both going to pray. And one is praying to save the people of Sodom. One is praying really relentlessly to spare his enemies. One is praying to spare the wicked. And on the flip side, Bilaam is praying relentlessly to destroy the righteous, to destroy his enemy. Abraham, after his prayer is unsuccessful, he walks away. He realizes that this is a fait accompli. He cannot save the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. Bilaam constantly tries to find a different place. He is moving from mountaintop to mountaintop because, in his view, he blames the circumstances. And if you look at the way the failed prayer of Abraham versus the failed prayer of Bilaam is portrayed in the Torah, Abraham shav limkomo, Abraham returned to his place, whereas Bilaam tried to change the place. Another interesting similarity between, or really similarity, but in the opposite way, mirror images of the story of Bilaam versus Abraham. Abraham travels on a donkey, or as they say in Texas, a donkey. I was once in a class, and they said, it was a donkey. I said, no, what does that mean? Oh, a donkey. To me, it sounds the same. I'm from New York still, right? The vowels are kind of interchangeable, if you know what I mean. It's a donkey here, not a donkey. Okay, noted. So Abraham travels on a donkey, and Bilaam travels on a donkey, and Moshe travels on a donkey, and Messiah, we're told, is going to come to us on a donkey. And this symbolizes the greatness of these people. The three greatest, most transformational people of our history are Abraham, Moses, Moshe, and Messiah. They herald the three revelations. Revelation number 1, Genesis. Revelation number 2, Sinai. Revelation number 3, Messiah. There's three epochs of our history, each really dominating 2,000 years. And Abraham is the one who kind of exposes the notion of God in the world. Moshe is the one who brings down Torah. Messiah is the one who brings about universality of knowledge of God. And each one of them, we're told, rides a donkey. And Bilaam, he rides a donkey. Meaning that on a certain level, he was equivalent to these absolute giants. Yet there's a difference. He has a conversation with his donkey, quite memorably, as you remember from the book of Numbers. Moreover, the Talmud says that he had a romantic relationship with his donkey. What does this all mean? So Shadis tell us that the Hebrew word for physicality and the Hebrew word for a donkey are the same letters, chamor and chomer, implying that the donkey is almost representative of physicality. Abraham and Moses and Messiah are riding a donkey. They're in complete control of their physicality. They have the reins. They're not subject to the whims of their physicality. Bilaam, he was riding his donkey, but then he started talking to it. He engaged with the physicality. We're told again that he actually had a romantic relationship with his donkey. Meaning, again, the lesson is, the principle is, that he was not someone who was in charge. He was almost equivalent. He was enmeshed with his physicality. Now, when our Mishnah tells us that these people, Abraham on one hand and Bilaam on the other hand, are opposites, it's essentially telling us we have to study the characteristics of Bilaam and contrast that with Abraham to find out exactly what we should and what we should not do. Moreover, the whole parsha of Parshas Balak in the book of Numbers, that's dedicated to the story of Bilaam and to the ill-fated decision that he made to curse the Jewish people, that in effect, or that in essence, is a study of the character of Bilaam to know exactly what we should not do. And we're told, Abraham, he represents a good eye, a humble spirit, and he's happy. He has a content appetite. Whereas Bilaam has an evil eye and a haughty spirit and a rapacious appetite. Now, what exactly these things represent is a major dispute amongst the commentators. We're going to share some of the ideas and some of the lessons that they teach us. So first of all, we're told that Abram was someone who was so generous. He was so kind-hearted. He was so giving of what he had to other people. He has three people who are pagans, or at least appear to be pagans, hungry, weary travelers, and he makes steaks for strangers. Who do you know that makes steaks for strangers? People want to give them food, of course. We have an impulse for generosity and hospitality, but to take three separate animals to give the best of the best to strangers, not only that, to idolaters, that is a level of goodness and benevolence that Abraham is in a league of his own in. He is someone who has such a good eye for other people. He is so generous with other people, he's willing to give the best of the best for the people. Moreover, Abraham is someone who is not desirous and not lustful. Not only wants to give others, he himself is content with what he has. One of the commentators points out here that Abraham had no trouble sending away Hagar. He had only a problem, it was only painful for him to send away Ishmael. If you think about it, Hagar was essentially married to Abraham. When God says, send her away, he has no problem. He is not lustful or desirous in any way. In fact, the Talmud tells us that Abraham is one of 3 people who completely defeated his Yetzer Hara, who completely defeated his evil inclination, and there was nothing left. It had no control over him. He was the one who had the reins to the donkey. The donkey had no control over him. By contrast, Bilaam, what is his solution after his 4 attempts at cursing the Jewish people fails? He tries multiple times to curse the Jewish people, and he fails again and again. And then he gives advice to Balak, king of Moab. He tells Balak, the God of these people hates promiscuity. Why don't you commission the daughters of Moab and Midian to go proposition the Jewish men, causing them to sin, and once you get them to sin with promiscuity, with immorality, you now have an opening to get them to do idolatry as well, and once they lose their kind of divine shield, then they are vulnerable to whatever you want to do to them. So the commentaries point out that only someone who is so personally immoral, so personally perverted, only someone like that would come up with such advice to try to cause the Jewish people to sin. And again, like our sages tell us, he had a romantic relationship with his donkey. He was obviously someone of very low moral character. Now, when Bilaam is hired to go curse the Jewish people, Balak, the king of Moab, sends a first cohort of dignitaries to try to woo Bilaam to come go curse the Jewish people. And he has a dream where God tells him, don't do it, don't go. And he wakes up in the morning and he tells the people, I'm sorry, I can't go with you. I can't go with you, implying because you are not dignified enough, you're not respectable enough. You sent me the undersecretary, not the secretary, and therefore I'm not going to go with you. And therefore Balak has to send another cohort of even more important dignitaries to try to woo Bilaam. Part of the character of Bilaam is that he would only associate with the highest people. He had what we would call today classism. Who do you associate with? You're a small person. You're not wealthy. You're not powerful. I don't see you. I look right over you. That is the characteristic of Bilaam. Who does Abraham interact with? The low people, the simple people, the hungry people, the weary people, the travelers, the stragglers. Abraham is someone who does not have this haughty spirit of saying, oh, only the most important people am I going to deal with. Abraham wants others to flourish. He's happy with their successes. The way he relates to his enemies is quite noble. Whereas Bilaam, he prays for the destruction of the Jewish people. Abraham has no envy. Abraham is not desirous of things. When Abraham has an opportunity to amass all of the whole world's wealth, he spearheads the victory of World War. All of the booty was his. He could have essentially conquered all the wealth and power of the world. And he responds, I don't want not a string or a shoe strap of this booty. He's not desirous of physical things. He's not interested in materialism. Whereas Bilaam, he has a rapacious desire for other people's stuff. When he tells the people he can't go with them, he says, if Balak will give me a palace full of gold and silver, I cannot violate the word of God. Rashi tells us that this shows us how much he actually desired wealth and power. I am, in fact, worthy and deserving of having a palace full of gold and silver. That is the characteristic of Bilaam. Now, one of the commentaries here says something very fascinating. He says that what indeed is underpinning the differences between Abraham and Bilaam? Abraham is someone who he's very happy with his lot. Whatever he has is good. Other people he wants to give more to. He wants to benefit other people as well. He's not envious of the goodness of other people. Where does this come from? Naturally, even small children, they want more, and then someone else takes their toys, and suddenly they're desirous of those toys. Yet Abraham is operating with this completely upside down way of looking at the world. Whatever he has is plenty, and other people don't have enough. So the commentator points out, the Chassid Yavitz, he says that someone who has this quality, it's evident that they are operating as a soul. What matters to the soul is the heavenly agenda. It's the heavenly coffers. The soul cares about the eternal world. The matters of this world are inconsequential. It's immaterial. You're here for 70, 80, 90 years, and that's it. You just need enough fuel here to survive your journey. That's the attitude of the soul. Abram had the attitude of the soul, and therefore the things here, it didn't matter to him so much. He wants other people to be happy. Let them be happy. Let them have plenty. To him, it didn't strike him as being important. Abram has tremendous humility. When these three travelers come to his door, he says, come, join me. Come to my I'm your servant. He calls people come to his house. He's their servant. He compares himself to dust and ashes. Now, again, it's important to remember, when we're talking about Abraham, he wasn't this weak, feeble person. Quite the contrary. He was a ferocious debater. He was someone that would kind of spread the word of monotheism throughout the world. And he would gather crowds and persuade them. He was very influential. He was very sharp. He would engage in polemics. And he wasn't a pushover. Nevertheless, he didn't have arrogance. He recognized that everything came from God. And he was able to view other people in a positive light. So essentially what we're being told over here is that all the good character is found in Abraham, and all the bad character is found in Bilaam, and we have to make a choice. Who do we want to emulate? Do we want to follow the ways of Abraham? Do we want to be a student of Abraham? Or do we want Bilaam to be our master? Maybe the most amazing part of this Mishnah is that all of us, Abraham lived, 3,700 years ago, a long time ago. We can still be his student. His academy, Abraham's academy, is still taking in new applicants. What does it take? What are the criteria? What are the requirements to be a student of Abraham? All you need to have is sterling character, goodness, wanting other people to flourish, humility, kindness, benevolence. That's all it takes. And you too can be a student of Abraham. I did see an amazing comment in the Sfas Emes. He says if you look at Bilaam's story, it does imply, if you look at it just in isolation, you take the little snippets, little quotes from Bilaam's story, you can learn a lot of great lessons. For example, he exhibits faith. He exhibits submission to God. He says, I can't do anything against the will of God. I'm powerless against God. Whatever God puts in my mouth, that's what I shall say. If you read these quotes in isolation, you say, wow, Bilaam's a really great guy. What an amazing person. What valuable lessons we can learn from Bilaam. And you know what? That's true. The content of a lot of the things that Bilaam said are just, are correct. But you have to be very careful who your teacher is. Just because the content of the message is good, is proper, is correct, if Bilaam is your teacher, you will inherit Gehenna. Our sages tell us that, in fact, this is what we just read recently in the Haftorah from the book of Malachi. V'torah yivatshu mipihu ki malach Hashem tzvakosu. Who should you seek Torah from? Someone who is as righteous and as kind and as pious as an angel. If someone's like that, if your teacher's like an angel, then you study Torah from him. If your teacher's not like an angel, then you don't want anything to do with him. You don't want to learn in the academy of Bilaam, because yes, the lessons themselves may be accurate in isolation, but that is a fast path towards arriving at a very dark place. What are the results of these academies? Where do the students of Abraham end up? And where do the students of Bilaam end up? Bilaam, we're told, the students of Bilaam end up in a well of destruction. These are men of bloodshed and deceit. Not a good place to be. Whereas the students of Abraham, they flourish in this world, but of course their ultimate reward is in the world to come. Now the verse that our Mishnah brings is Lahanchil le'ohavai yesh. This is a verse like we mentioned in Proverbs chapter 8. God will bequeath to those who love him yesh. Yesh means a possession. Says the Mishnah in the end of the book of Uksin. In the future, the Almighty will give every tzaddik 310 worlds. The reward for the righteous, every righteous person, is 310 worlds. So the whole world's yours, that times 310, which is pretty nifty, pretty cool. And every tzaddik is going to end up with 310 worlds. Why is there a specific number, 310 worlds? Where does that number come from? So one of the explanations is, how many mitzvahs are there? If you count all the mitzvahs in the Torah, how many mitzvahs do you have? You have 613. 613 is a very important number. That's how many mitzvahs we have. But the truth is, there are 7 more rabbinic mitzvahs. So the total amount of mitzvahs that we have are actually 620. Half of 620 is 310. A person who's righteous does all 620 mitzvahs, and therefore merits 620 worlds, because every mitzvah is a whole world. But the problem is that you have to give up half of it. Half of your mitzvahs, or half of your worlds, go to all the people who helped you get there. We have a concept called a Yisachar and Zevulun agreement. 2 brothers, one studies Torah, and one supports that endeavor financially. The people who support the endeavor, they take half the worlds, and therefore every tzaddik ends up with 310 worlds. It's a pretty good bargain, this Mishnah. We're told we can still be students of Abraham, we can have an amazing life over here, and we can merit 310 worlds in the afterlife. Or the other option before us, we can be a miserable chap like Bilaam, have no friends in this world, and end up in a very, very dark and awful place of punishment in the next world. And we, of course, should choose our world and our master, our teacher. We should choose that very wisely. I thank you for listening. My email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.